Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Bonsoir, madame et monsieur. This concludes the bilingual part of my talk. I just have to show off because I don't get to do so very often. Well, thank you, Dean Van Duzer, for a very, very generous introduction. So it actually makes what I'm going to say more difficult. I don't know if I can meet your expectation, but I'll try. At least in one sense, in the abnormal sense, I think I can do fairly well. So why 5 projects, which is the title of tonight's talk? In fact, it was a difficult decision. I debated between 3 projects, maybe to quite a few projects. It's in a way a Chinese dilemma today. As a practice of architecture and design, I face the challenge of embracing the opportunities of a new market economy, meanwhile really see the needs to resist that. It's between this struggle of embracing and resisting, we try to and came to focus on a number of projects. So I'd like to go through the projects and also to discuss some general conditions of practicing architecture and design in China today. Okay, the first project is the ISM project. It is about ideology, and it is also about history and heritage. And the particular ISM we are talking about here is the one related to architecture from the 60s and 70s, namely during the Cultural Revolution. And if you have read a bit about China, and well, you don't have to read, right? Because I don't like to read. I can ask you to do that. You understand how important that period is for China. It's very traumatic, and it was more a political struggle internally for the Communist Party, but it did turn out as a cultural revolution for the whole country. And at that time, they were a kind of architecture produced. Maybe somehow we can look at this particular building as a good example. This is a railway station in the city of Changsha. That's like the south of China. And then if you look at this building, and the most interesting element is that thing on the top. The image is black and white, so you don't really see the color of it, which would give you at least a hint what it might be. It's red. The original design, in fact, it didn't look like that. It was meant to be a torch. That was one of the ideological symbols. However, at the beginning, they designed the flame of the torch with the point towards west, because the east wind has to overwhelm the west wind, so it could only go that way. However, it could be read as somehow paying homage or attention to the west. So they turned it around. And then it created another problem. So the west wind is overwhelming the east wind. And then they went on. So they couldn't get it right. So the red torch is going up straight. And then this is one of the first buildings got a nickname in China. Now there are many. So this building is called Little Red Pepper. So it doesn't look like, also in that region, is next to Sichuan. They do consume a lot of red peppers anyway. But what's interesting is that if we take the political symbol away, compositionally, it is more or less a classical building. So where did that come from? It came from this idea. So the first ism I like to discuss a bit is socialist realism. It came from the Soviet Russia at that time, or before. And then this is the University of Moscow. So Chinese architecture for at least 3 decades, 50s, 60s, and 70s, we're learning directly not only from these examples. There were Soviet architects, experts, as we would say at that time, staying in China, working closely with Chinese architects to produce socialist, realist buildings. So I'll show you examples just in a few seconds. Before that, again, the reason is called realism. It's because classicist paintings, of course, are realistic. Somehow, I think Stalin, whoever came up with the idea that to make classicism contemporary by calling it realism, so that it's not just a historic reference, but something actually is part of the contemporary time. And then this is, as you all know, the Old Museum in Berlin by Schinkel. It's a very fine example of neo-classicism. And then back to China. And I'd like to show you 3 examples of socialist realism in architecture. One is the museum on the Tiananmen Square in Beijing. And it doesn't, as you can see, it doesn't really look Chinese in any way, formally speaking. Probably it looks more socialist Russian because of these kind of ideological decorations. And that was, of course, strongly influenced by the Soviet architecture at that time. This is built in 1959. And then this one is more interesting. Well, this is not. This is the Forbidden City. And it's, of course, a great piece of architecture. What's interesting is here that you see a classical building with a base, a plinth, and then you see a roof. And really the body of the building is less important. So that makes actually the Chinese classicism different from the European classicism. And then at that time, there were buildings designed in such a way that it picks up the formal traditions in Chinese architecture, because, again, at that time, the Russian experts were doing similar things back in Russia. They wanted to, or Stalin asked them to do architecture that would differentiate Russia from the other European countries. So, and the architects in China had to follow the suit. And however, and they were much bigger buildings, and something like these is more using the Chinese old city gate as the reference rather than the Forbidden City. And so that's a sketch, and when it was built, and it was like that. Interestingly, all the political and ideological symbols were gone, but still considered as part of the socialist realism genre. And then even sometimes, and they were sort of an Art Deco touch to it. This is the planetarium of Beijing. And then if you look closely, and you see details or decorations, and in this case, in the reliefs based on Chinese mythologies and folklores and so on. And so you can see actually within this rather strict idea of socialist realism, and there were different variations that would fulfill such kind of a idea, but without just using the political symbols. So I thought that was a very interesting thing. So when we got later on, you'll see in the project, and we actually reconsidered somehow taking the socialist realism as part of the our immediate actually heritage. And then before I get to that, so let's put socialist realism on side and look at what's going on in other parts of the world at that time, namely in the 70s and of course 60s and 50s. And here, of course, is something we're familiar with. I have to leave pretty early tomorrow morning, and so I don't get to go around to look at the brutalist buildings by Mr. Erickson, but I have to come back. And my question is this. Well, everyone knows the answer, but it's still an important question to ask. Where did the idea of brutalism came from? Well, from Le Corbusier, but also it's from India. So I've seen pictures, and actually in 1999, I was in India. I saw the way construction was carried out still in India. Basically, it's a crew of all women carrying materials, cement and stones and so on, in a bucket on top of their heads. It's that kind of a technology that Le Corbusier saw and realized could turn architecture to a different direction. He saw a different expression of concrete, of course, such as in Chandigarh, and then took that home. And so when he built the 3 unitas, one in Marseille, one in Zurich, the third one I think is in Berlin. And however, the concrete didn't have to be rough. So the roughness of concrete became an expression of the materiality of architecture. And then in the United States, someone, of course Paul Rudolph, decided to take that idea, but using a very different technology. And here, of course, as we all know, you pour the concrete, it's not really the direct imprint of the formwork, but rather craftsmen would come back and chisel to the concrete to give it a very rough texture. And then in Brazil, in Latin America, and I think it came to the climax of brutalism, and this is Lina Bobardi, and this is Paulo Mendes da Rocha, and this is Oscar Niemeyer. There were different ways, again, to take on this notion of brutalism, while really also, let's say, taking advantage of a pretty rough technology they have. If you go and see some of the construction sites and buildings in Brazil, they are rough. So it's amazing to see how the architects say, that's not a problem, let's turn it around, and really to make it an expression of architecture. So these two things. And we like to learn from our heritage, as I said earlier on, from the 60s and 70s. We also like to learn from countries such as India and Brazil, and to really push maybe the potential of rough concrete and also an expression of classicism, which is what I learned when I was in college in Nanjing before I came to the United States. So could we marry these two things? Well, we tried. And there's another master I was very much interested in and was rather inspired. So this is, of course, Lucian Freud, the British painter. So he's painting by technique also very realistic, but yet the paintings, the results of it, it really is not as classical as one may think. It lacks of the notion of beauty, the essential sort of idea behind classicism, but rather he was trying to explore maybe even the ugliness of the humanity, as we could sometimes witness today, or a combination of the two at least. So maybe that's something is already a brutalist classicism. And then here comes to our project. It's a museum for the Cultural Revolution. Today in China, it can't be yet just officially called that. So to go around, there are a lot of ways to go around these things in China. We're pretty kind of a clever people. So it's called 1966 and 76 Museum. So everyone knows what it meant, right? So, and also it's part of a town for various museums. The client is a collector. And so we actually, our office did the master plan. So there's a river in the middle, so we built a museum on the bridge. And it looks like this. So you can see the classical spirit. There is balance, and there is this horizontal division of different layers. However, also you can see it's not sit on the solid ground, but rather on a bridge. And this is the set of drawings give you the ideas. So what we were trying to do is to convey this notion of the classical spirit. Meanwhile, we also like to undermine that. So it becomes a way we like to create a critique of that period in our history. So there is a very radical political movement, but meanwhile the architecture we're carrying on something that from the past. So we kind of recreated that by taking on architecture in such a way. And these are the sectional drawings and plans. So this is underneath the bridge. The river is here. And then this is the museum box. It's pretty much one big open space. The interior is not quite done yet. The client is still sorting out his collection and deciding what to put in there. And this is the roof terrace. The building, as you can see here, is the bridge. Really also is turned into a public or urban space for the town. So this is more like a street. So here is the street, or rather bridge connecting museum on both sides. And there's a path on the other side. And then you can go up to the sculptural terrace on the roof. And we used two kinds of material primarily. One is concrete using a bamboo formwork. The other one was pebble, because there are a lot of rivers and waters, so there are a lot of pebble. And then you can see the texture from the bamboo formwork. The reason we're doing this very rough surface because the laborers were totally unskilled. They couldn't really do anything but this. So it's not like we're trying to do architecture that looks like Brazil or India. We are part of that world. So, and this is the rooftop. The sculptures are not up yet. The interior with 4 skylights. You see 2 of them here. And then you see one of the skylights close up. And then here is the bridge. Rather, these slanted columns. A stage. There's going to be an open air tea house, and with a performance going on the stage. And that's not a political slogan, although it appears that way. It says, "Watch out for your head." And then, of course, architecturally speaking, we were trying to play with this idea of infrastructure, architecture, and perhaps city all combined to some extent. And then you see the surroundings of this building. And from afar, actually, you don't see much at all. It really becomes just something in the back of this beautiful landscape. So that's ISM project, because I don't think today we can deny our history as if all of our learning in architecture comes from the West. The West is there. It's very important in the global era. So we are looking at not only Europe or the America, as I said, also countries like India or Brazil. We should come to Vancouver more to look at some of the architecture as well. But meanwhile, I think it's also very important to look at the architecture me, like in my case, personally, I grew up with. And that's part of the architecture, perhaps I understand more than all the other. So that's one project. The next project is pretty straightforward. It's about material, about technology. Architecture is very tangible. I talked about concrete. I wanted to touch upon the other kind of a material also we are very much interested in. By showing this project, I also like to say that with the high speed, large volume of work in China, we try to squeeze in research in our practice. This is a house now we're doing another testing before going to the construction, is using fiberglass as the structural material. So fiberglass is something, it's very commonly used. This is what we are using. So in China, you see the material used for, actually you see a sculpture made of fiberglass. You see a boat and like a yacht also made of fiberglass. It goes on and on and on. And again, worldwide, I know in UK there are several bridges now built with fiberglass and so on. So we did some research. So I can go to the next slide. So the material is about 1/6 of the weight or density of steel. The other way to look at it is like 6 times as strong, or stronger than steel. So it's a very lightweight material. So that could save, of course, on the transportation side and the foundation and so on. And also it makes the construction on site all pretty much just assemblage. It means that the production of the material all happens in the factory. So it's actually, it's material lends very well to a pre-fabrication. And here you're looking at the testing of production for the columns, the tubes, studs, and extruding it. This is very low-tech kind of a production conditions, and then making the floor plate. It's a combination of fiberglass and plywood, and then testing the strength of the column. So we collaborate regularly with engineers and scientists. This is a university in Nanjing we work with. We're still working with them. And then putting together a very simple detailed design so that for the workman is going to be fairly simple and straightforward. At one point, our office would produce a lot of drawings for a project. We may go back doing that, but for a while we realized on the construction sites, the workforce, they didn't look at our drawings anyway. And we learn from them, but also we learn how to work with them. It's a different way. Here we say, so look at this project. There's only one really critical joint. Let's get that right, and then we have the whole system correct. Basically, it's a steel joint like this, and so we can slide the studs over it, and then with that steel angle, so we can connect the floor plate, like this. So we created a pretty simple system, as you can see here, and we do need some shear walls and actually some bracing at both ends, but otherwise it's a very simple system. The building is going to sit on a very steep slope. It's a big house in a very scenic area, just right outside of the city center of Nanjing. So the plan, the various floors. The house is like more for vacation and weekends, so 3 families could come here and share the house, and there are common spaces for them to get together, do things. Eventually the house would look like this, and a drawing showing how some of the details and bracing and connections and so on. So we have done a number of experiments with the local technical university in Nanjing, and this is one of the 2-story mock-ups. So as you can see, so we were putting together up a small portion of it, and have these loads to be put on top, and collecting all the data. And then so far, the structural part is done, and the fireproofing part also is done. And one of the last experiments we're doing has to do with the aging of the material. So that was in the project was exhibited in Beijing here. And again, that was another 2-story mock-up we tried. So anyway, the lesson we learned from this project had to do a lot with what you're looking at now. When we pick up the material, one of the reasons was that it was commonly used in many different fields, but not in architecture, of course for good reasons. For instance, for the fire issue, because when it burns, it would emit a poisonous gas. So that our design put all the fiberglass members outside of the interior enclosure as the way to pass the fire code and so on. So it wasn't for the aesthetics of this material. Only after we have been working on this project for a number of years, only after all this time we realized actually we started to find beauty in it. You see the fibers, that very cheap plastic thing, actually could look really rather beautiful. And we actually put LED lights in there, and that was too much for the design. We took them out. But I think that's what's really exciting for architects. Architects aren't engineers. We're interested in engineering, but also we are the people who really try to help the city and with the society to really have a beautiful environment, and that confirms that. So a project like this. So this is a fiberglass house. It's going to go up right after Chinese New Year, which is going to be next week, actually in more 3 weeks' time. So this is the next project, the Earth project. Of course, it's about city. This is a project I debated if I should put it in there or not, because everyone in Vancouver knows what's a livable city. Well, at least I can tell you why Chinese cities aren't livable. It's pretty straightforward. This is Shanghai. This is where all the people would go for a good life and tourism. And this is our project is outside. It's like a satellite town. And we're giving the project to design an office park. From the very beginning, I thought that idea is a little hard to accept. After being all these years in the US, especially in Houston, I'm sorry, Blair, I have to. Office park is a problem because it means that you're going to live in the house somewhere else and you're going to go shopping again in a third location. So you do a lot of driving, and then you have to have 3 parking spaces just for the one car you have. So why can't we bring people to live in this office park? Is for the advertisement industry. There's no pollution. It's considered a creative industry. So we're debating that. And then we look at the city. This is a very unfair picture of Shanghai. Shanghai is actually very nice, but it's not also that difficult to take a picture like this. So you can see it's hard to find people. It's just like in this image, they are being pushed really to the periphery. And you don't even see bicycles because, of course, you have these very wide roads. They aren't streets, with cars. This kind of landscape, of course, is not park. It is decorations. And they got some palm trees from Miami or from the south anyway. There, and then of course architecture don't really speak to each other. It's visually also is very chaotic. It shows quite a few of the problems of living. And meanwhile, outside of Shanghai, you still find places like this. You don't see people, but people are in there. You can see their laundries and their little pots of plants and so on. So our question is, can we actually try to at least to improve upon the quality of living if we could actually turn an office park into a town? And the question we asked specifically is, how do people get lunch? It's actually a problem in these office parks. So what we did is this. So we look at the typical block. the smallest one would be 400 by 400 meters. And in that case, if it's for a residential community, it's typically gated. So you go in, there are some internal streets, but they're not connected with the city. And if it's an office, again, as an office park, it's closed. We wanted to do a city, still people can go out to get lunch, to do some shopping, to meet friends, if that's possible. So we studied different cities, from Barcelona to New York City to Portland, Oregon. Is that in Oregon? Yeah. Sorry we didn't study Vancouver in this case, but I have a sense Vancouver would work also very well as an example. So again, I don't need to talk about why the blocks should be small, but we think doesn't matter how we like to live. If you are in the city, you would like to enjoy urbanity. That has to do with life on the street in the urban spaces. So there should be a lot of well-defined urban spaces. So one of them is when you walk, and then that space should be defined. So I'm becoming very conservative. Well, I'm away, so I'm sorry for the folks who probably knew me in very different ways. And this is even more, so this is totally reactionary. So we studied perimeter blocks and so on. Okay, so I probably should go faster here. But anyway, so you can see we have done a lot of that. The last one is that we like to suggest, although I think people, architects in Berlin, did some very fine buildings in a similar way. We like to suggest, even when we have fairly high density, we don't have to really make large scale blocks. So the blocks would remain small, but having more square meters on top. And that turned out to be a hotel actually sitting on top. So that's the final version of the project. So these are typical 40 by 40 blocks. And then that's the building with a hotel floating on top. And then there's a conference center. There is a gymnasium and other sports facilities and so on. And public spaces for the hotel underneath as 4 mini blocks. And then we studied the streets, shared streets, as but probably you don't do it here, but in China we do. We learn a lot from Dutch architects. And however, there's one idea I thought was very important is the notion of shared street. It's flourishing in Japan, our neighbor, but it didn't really get to China for some reason. And we thought maybe we could do an introduction. So basically, it's how to make the cars to slow down so that the street is shared by both people and cars. And then to bring the waterway into the street, it was something people there in that area did for centuries, but now they tend to separate them. So we have done a lot of negotiation to bring the canals back into the urban space and so on. Facades of some of the buildings. And that's the construction site as the photographs taken about maybe 10 days ago, a week ago. So you see that's the hotel up there, and there are some of the blocks and the covered walkway. All right, so you can see here. So we used two different approaches for the materiality here. So on the bottom is the more traditional material, heavier, and then something lighter on top. So it gave you a sense of two cities the more traditional mini block city and a different scale of maybe a more contemporary city. But just suppose here in a very, very direct way. So that's the EART project. So the idea, of course, I can talk more about, but you can see it's pretty simple. It's really to create a right scale because it's outside of the main city of Shanghai. So we think the scale actually could even be smaller. So the next project is the alternative project. I think in Leslie's introduction, and she did mention our office does more work than architecture. So I'd like to show you something. So we started to do some of these projects as kind of an extracurricular activity in the office. But now that we actually really created a regular output in this particular direction. So this is it means a lotus. You'll see it. We designed a tray for Alessi, the Italian company. This is outside our office. It's very important at that time. We found an office. When we look out, we don't see other buildings, so that we could design buildings, so nothing would distract us. However, with this commission of a tray, we had a hard time. I had all sorts of ideas. None of them worked. And then one day, I was looking at a lotus leaf. I thought maybe that could just be a tray, so we don't really have to design it after all. So we got a lotus leaf and let it dry. So at one point, this is in our office, it looks more like a tray, and then that's it. And we had it digitally scanned. So this is a design we proudly present as a collaboration between the nature and FCJZ. That's that. And then, of course, I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with the main technology Alessi has. It is the stamping of stainless steel. So with one stamping, that's it. And you can turn it around and so on. And so that one, we actually didn't design much. We, of course, had to make it stable on a flat surface. But other than that, it was something we took. And then this one, we did a little more design. Hulu actually is the fruit gourd. I don't know if you have it in Canada. There are two types. This one type with two bulbs, and there's another kind with just one bulb. And in northern China especially, this is one with one bulb. So we used to just cut them up, and you clean the inside, and then it became an utensil. It's waterproof, so you can use it to scoop up water, rice, what have you, and use it as a bowl to keep fruits and so on. So in this case, we did do a bit of design, but we thought, let's just redo that in a more industrialized manner. So this is our design. So we have bigger hulus or gourds like these, smaller ones. This is a personal set. These are for serving plates. And so when you open them up, you have a place for different dishes, and then for rice, for soup, and so on. So it makes a nice tablescape. And then they were quite popular, so we had to make baby gourds for sauce and things. And when you eat, you drink. So we made a decanter for Western wine. And then when you eat a salad, you need the vinegar and olive oil. So we went on and on. So these are the double happiness gourds. So that's that. So to finish up, the last project also for us is very important. It comes back to architecture, or rather to how we work as architects. So we draw, well, probably not as much today. We used to. And then we make models. And then in our office, we have this open yard, so we can experiment with materials, do mock-ups and things ourselves. So there's always a question how we really represent architecture. So that question is always there. And then recently, we had an exhibition in Beijing, which actually allowed us to look back not only the 20 years of FCJZ, but also back to the time I just came to the US and learning, relearning to do drawing as a tool for architecture from a gentleman named Rodney Place, who was a classmate of Professor Chris McDonald here. Of course, Rodney was from AA. And then, so here at this exhibition we did, we were able to re-examine and reflect upon some of the idea. So as you can see, the material is there, the ism also is there. And then the exhibition, and this is, that was a poster, happened at a major private museum in Beijing, which is called this Woolens, a name of a collector originally from Belgium. Woolens Center of Contemporary Art. We designed these facades. So you see these big wheels. So at night it closes, and then every morning it's opened up. And then we showed different installations we did elsewhere. This one was done with pavement blocks made of polyethylene, originally exhibited at Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And the main part of the exhibition had 6 themes. Some are more straightforward, has to do with the spatial conditions of Chinese architecture, but some are a little off. It's about perception here, and there's a greater cultural project we're very much concerned with. And then this is again more straightforward, has to do with the tangibility of architecture, material, again, construction. And this one has to do with city, and the last one is about inhabitation. And this is a door I designed many years ago, and we rebuilt it for the exhibition. These were existing doors, and in this case also they were existing. And these are new. We wanted to do a door that could still close the old door, but while it could open as a new one. So it combines the movement of sliding, folding, and a swing. So this is called we gave it a very, very good name, sliding, folding swing door. And then the 6 themes became 6 blocks. And this is an old factory designed by East German engineers. Now it's an art center. So and then there is a sense of a city, I guess, and then we're using different construction methods. So each block is using a different construction. So what we're really exhibiting are 6 construction processes. So this is rammed earth using basic plywood formwork. And rammed earth again, using different colors of earth and a glass formwork. And then here's the PVC tubes as a formwork for concrete. And this is rubber formwork for concrete. And this is a sliding formwork for plaster. And bamboo formwork for plaster. And then we had 12 days to build all of that. So, and then we kind of succeeded. And there are just details. And just give you an idea of China. While we were doing these constructions, day and night, we had to. And there were a drama festival going on next door. And so one night, there's a guy, I don't remember, he was either English or American, came out and just kneeled in front of me like this. I thought he was moved by our exhibition. And he said, of course, something different. He said, please stop. We couldn't hear our show. It's all the noise you guys are making out here. And very intense drama festival. So anyway, that was one of the accidents. So glass formwork. This is, I can see the space, and this is a plaster with a sliding formwork and bracketing. Very crude, but it's strong. Again, the brutalist idea, I guess, is always there. And other structural system we're working with, this is of traditional tile, but making something very light, possibly a pavilion. We did one, actually 2 of those in Korea, the fiberglass house. Again, that's the city, or we hope that that's going to be a city. So I knew we're going to be in a theater. Also, we did a fashion show for the opening of the exhibition, because we did all this design of clothes. So I wanted to show you 2 projects to end it. One is film. It's pretty straightforward. It's 3.5 minutes. It's a kung fu movie. So. all the credits are in Chinese. I'm gonna just cut it off. Anyway, so okay, and just to this is just entertainment. And then here is the opening of our show, and then when the fashion show is clothing designed by our office. All the models were architects from our office, plus a few staff from the museum. All right. Well, I know some of the design were difficult to see. But anyway, in conclusion, it is between this struggle of embracing and resisting the Chinese condition today with this new market economy, we're trying to contribute perhaps not only to the urbanization, but to the Chinese contemporary culture as well. Thank you.